You're sitting in a cave tens of thousands of years ago, and someone picks up a hollow bone. Not to eat with, not to build with. They bring it to their lips, and for the first time in that person's entire life, sound comes out of an object instead of a mouth. Nobody needed that sound to survive the night, and yet somehow it became one of the most universal things humans have ever done. Here's the thing nobody tells you about music. By every practical survival metric, it shouldn't exist at all. It doesn't grow food, it doesn't build shelter, it doesn't kill anything or keep you warm. And yet every single human culture ever documented, without exception, makes music. That's not a coincidence. That's evolution trying to tell you something. So let's actually ask the obvious question. When did this start, and why would a species under constant survival pressure ever bother developing it? Let's start with the physical evidence, because it goes back further than most people assume. At Divje Babe cave in Slovenia, researchers uncovered a hollowed cave bear femur with a row of evenly spaced holes, dated to roughly 60,000 years ago. Paleontologist Ivan Turk, who led the excavation, has argued this is one of the earliest known musical instruments, a possible flute crafted not by our own species but by Neanderthals. The debate over whether it's genuinely an instrument or simply a bone gnawed by scavenging carnivores has run for decades. And it's important to be honest that the debate isn't fully settled. But researchers who support the flute interpretation point to the precise, evenly spaced holes as difficult to explain any other way. Here's the thing nobody tells you about the confirmed evidence, though. Even setting the Divje Babe debate aside, there's flutes nobody seriously disputes. At Hohle Fels and Geissenklösterle in Germany, archaeologists recovered flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory, dated to around 40,000 years ago, unambiguously made by early Homo sapiens. These aren't crude objects either. They show carefully carved finger holes, precise enough to produce a genuine musical scale. That's the wild part. Somewhere in deep prehistory, someone sat down with a piece of bone or ivory and deliberately engineered it to make specific, controllable pitches. That's not an accident. That takes real planning, real patience, and real intention, applied toward a goal that has nothing to do with hunting or eating. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because if music offered zero survival advantage, natural selection should have quietly filtered it out generations ago. It didn't. So researchers have spent decades trying to explain what music was actually doing for early humans. One of the strongest answers involves rhythm and the body, not melody and the ear. Researcher Bronwyn Tarr has studied what happens physiologically when people move in synchrony, dancing, drumming, marching in step, and found that synchronized rhythmic movement triggers a measurable release of endorphins, the body's natural painkillers. Crucially, Tarr's research found this endorphin boost is significantly stronger when movement is done in a group and in sync, compared to the exact same physical exertion done alone. Groups that moved together in rhythm also showed increased feelings of closeness and trust toward each other afterward, even among strangers who'd never met before the experiment. That's not a small effect. That means rhythm, at a basic biological level, functions as a kind of social glue, chemically rewarding groups for moving and acting together. Here's the thing nobody tells you about why that would matter so much to early humans specifically. Survival for most of our species' history depended almost entirely on group cooperation, coordinated hunting, shared childcare, collective defense against predators and rival groups. Any tool that reliably strengthened group bonding and trust wasn't a luxury. It was a direct survival advantage and a return in evolutionary currency that easily justified the time spent carving a bone flute or practicing a rhythm. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar has extended this idea even further, arguing that music and dance may have functioned as a kind of social technology for bonding larger groups at once, in the same way he's argued language itself may have partly evolved as a substitute for one-on-one grooming. Physical grooming, picking through fur, only bonds two individuals at a time. But a group singing or drumming together can chemically bond dozens of people simultaneously, all at once through shared rhythm alone. Now here's another layer that's easy to miss, because it doesn't involve adults at all. Researcher Ellen Desanayake has studied something she calls communicative musicality, the sing-song, rhythmic, pitch-exaggerated way caregivers instinctively speak to infants across virtually every human culture ever studied. That exaggerated melodic speech pattern, sometimes called parentese, isn't taught. It emerges spontaneously, and infants respond to it with measurably more attention and calmer emotional states than they show toward flat, unmusical speech. Desanayake's argument is that this early musical exchange between parent and infant may represent one of music's oldest functional roots, a bonding mechanism that predates language itself, keeping a helpless infant calm, connected, and emotionally regulated during the long, vulnerable stretch of human childhood development, which is dramatically longer than in any other primate. That's not a coincidence either. If human infants require years of dependent care, Any mechanism that strengthens the caregiver bond and regulates infant distress carries enormous survival weight, repeated in some form in essentially every documented human culture on Earth. Archaeologist Stephen Mithen has proposed something even broader connecting all of this together, an idea he calls, a semi-serious acronym standing for holistic, manipulative, multimodal, musical, and mimetic communication. Mithen's argument is that early hominins, including Neanderthals, may have communicated for a long stretch of evolutionary history using an expressive, musical, emotionally rich system of sound before fully grammatical language ever developed. Under this theory, music isn't something layered on top of language later. It may be closer to language's direct ancestor, an emotionally expressive communication system that both music and language eventually branched out from. Here's the thing nobody tells you about that idea. It would mean the urge to hum, chant, or rhythmically vocalize isn't a modern add-on to human communication at all. It might be one of the oldest communicative instincts we have, older than grammar, older than syntax, older possibly than fully modern language itself. There's also a colder, more strategic evolutionary theory worth mentioning, honestly, because it doesn't get talked about as often. Some researchers have proposed that group music making, particularly loud, coordinated singing or drumming, may have functioned as a signal to rival groups, a demonstration of numbers, coordination, and unity, broadcast outward as a kind of social deterrent. A group that can sing and move in perfect unison is, whether they intend it or not, advertising that they're organized, cohesive, and not an easy target. Under this framing, music wasn't purely about bonding insiders. It may have simultaneously functioned as a warning to outsiders. Put all of these threads together, and a genuinely compelling picture starts to form. Music didn't need to feed anyone or build anything to earn its place in human behavior, because it was doing something arguably just as critical to survival, binding groups together through shared endorphin release and synchronized rhythm, soothing and regulating infants through a caregiving bond older than spoken language, possibly serving as an early communicative bridge before grammar fully existed, and potentially signaling group strength and cohesion to rivals watching from outside the circle. None of those functions require melody for its own sake, and yet, once that capacity existed, humans clearly didn't stop at the functional minimum. They carved instruments with real craftsmanship. They engineered precise, deliberate musical scales into bone and ivory tens of thousands of years before anyone needed to sell a single record or fill a single stadium. So picture that cave again. Someone brings a hollowed bone to their lips, and for the first time, sound comes out of an object instead of a mouth. The people around the fire go quiet. Someone starts moving their body, small and rhythmic at first, matching the sound without being told to. Somebody hums along, badly, and nobody minds. A baby somewhere in the group calms slightly, soothed by a melodic hum layered over its mother's voice, a pattern it will hear again every night for years without ever knowing why it works. Nobody understood in that moment that they were building something that would outlast fire, outlast the cave, outlast every single person present that night. They just knew that sound, moving through a group in rhythm, made something in the room feel different, closer, safer, more like a group and less like a collection of strangers who happened to share a fire. And somehow, from that ordinary, unremarkable moment repeated countless times across countless nights, humans built one of the only things every single culture on the planet still shares in common, tens of thousands of years and thousands of miles apart, without ever once having to explain to each other why it mattered.